So for those of you that may not know, recently the owner of MonsterVerze was accused of some not so great things, and alongside that she has released an official document addressing some of the comments that have resurfaced as well as just some of the narratives going on. And of course it's a commentary channel. I'm going to do my due diligence and talk about the situation. I've received a ton of DMs and tickets and emails being like, Pommy, why aren't you talking about this? Like, you're biased, blah, blah, blah. And I do need to clarify that I do have a professional relationship with MonsterVerze. However, that relationship does not impede on my ability to talk about a situation. And, when I talk about anything, I always try to do my due diligence. And when allegations like these and allegations surrounding this kind of commentary come out, I'm not just going to rush to YouTube to make a video about it and to profit off of it for a quick buck. My intention is always to do my absolute best in my research and make sure that what I'm saying, to my knowledge and the best of my ability, is truthful. I'm not going to skip ahead and not do research and just spit out a video because people want me to. And so I do want to clarify, I'm going to try and approach this from a perspective of not being biased. I do want people to know that I did actually have the opportunity to interview people involved. So not to say that I'm the one that knows the most about this, however, I do feel like I have a pretty decent understanding of some of the aspects of what is going to be talked about, and during those times I will discuss specifically what I'm referring to. However, for those of you that don't know, the owner released this document a couple days ago, and I think it's going to be on your screen now. I'm also really sick, so sorry about my voice, but she released this document addressing three main things that have been brought against her and just tweets that have been circulating, and I'm going to address them one by one and going over some stuff that is truthful and not truthful. And before we fully get into the video, I do want to clarify that a lot of the stuff that's going on or is being circulated is based in truth. However, comments are being taken out of context or comments are being completely made up, and so I do want to be very careful with the way that I address this, and I'm only going to be addressing the content mentioned in this document because that's the only content that I can prove 100% is accurate. So with that in mind, it reads, hello, do not paraphrase. I want to start off by offering my sincerest apologies for the language I used back in 2020, specifically the R word. There's no excuse for it. I was an ill-informed teenager who didn't understand what was acceptable to say at the time. When I learned about the harmful association behind the word, I stopped using it completely. I kept that harmful language in the past in 2020 where it belongs. I'm very thankful to my community and others who have held me accountable because the community I want to build is one where people are encouraged to hold their leaders and peers to a higher standard. That word had continued to hurt our community in so many ways, and I'm deeply sorry for contributing to that harm both then and now. Seeing someone who speaks for inclusivity make this kind of mistake is disappointing, and it truly breaks my heart that I ever caused that kind of pain. I can't undo it, but I can acknowledge it and make sure my actions moving forward show how much I've changed. The rest of this document addresses the comments I made in the past. If you only wish to read the final apology, please skip to the end. So starting off here, there was a tweet that surfaced with the owner discussing something, and I believe she was like using the R word as like an insult towards somebody. And to somebody who's neurodivergent, I think the whole notion of reclaiming words, and she did, I think one of her tweets, she said that she is neurodivergent as well, but the whole notion of reclaiming harmful words, I think is kind of a sensitive subject. And personally, as someone that's neurodivergent, I don't think I would ever reclaim that word just because it's been used against me personally in real life. It's not a kind word, and I think it especially is not kind when it's used to like be weaponized against somebody else. However, something I did want to clarify was, at least when I grew up, the R word and the R word being used against me was like not something that was punished by teachers at my school. And maybe this is different, but I feel like a lot of words just recently actually became public knowledge that they shouldn't be used. Specifically, example, words like gypsy or referring to people as gypsies is seen as being like kind of like a harmful word to use against somebody now. And that is also paired with the R word, which I think, although it's inherently harmful and those words have been inherently harmful, I don't believe it became mainstream knowledge that you shouldn't use them until recently. At least that's when I learned about it, was around that time. So I want to try to give the benefit of the doubt and say, maybe people didn't fully understand the weight of those words, and those words weren't as heavily, judged as they are now, and people weren't necessarily at the time held accountable for using these kind of words. If you go back to some of your favorite celebrities or public figures, they were using this word, and some of them still continue to use this word. So I think maybe a lot of people aren't informed that the word shouldn't be used. And so in this situation in particular, I do want to try to give the benefit of the doubt. However, I do appreciate the accountability here, saying it shouldn't have been used, and it came from a position of just not understanding. So I think that's a good start to the document. Now, here it says outlines Islam/blasphemy, Queen Elizabeth, Lizzie, and theft. This section, Islam/blasphemy. Islam is a faith I grew up with as a child. My ummi encouraged me to follow her faith, but always gave me room to explore my own understanding of religion and spirituality. She always believed that faith is personal, not a straight line, and that people grow with their beliefs as they grow through life. And then there are these two tweets. It reads, yes, kind of like Naomi Campbell, she has such good God vibes. Like, if asked what I think Allah looks like, Naomi is pretty close. And for those that don't know, Allah is like the equivalent of the God in that religion. I think it depends entirely if this person believes in Islam. I'm Muslim myself, and when these jokes are made with others in my community, it's funny, but I also understand when shared to other audiences, it can be very inappropriate. So I guess she got some backlash for this initial comment and clarified below that she at the time was Muslim. She goes, showing that I was Muslim at the time. While I no longer identify with Islam as an adult, my beliefs now lean more agnostic. My comments about Allah were never meant to insult or mock anyone's faith. They reflected my own confusion and exploration at the time. For many, that perspective can seem blasphemous, and I understand that. I apologize to anyone who was hurt by those words. I don't push my beliefs onto others and have no issue with anyone's religion or lack thereof. I've learned to find peace in respecting all faiths equally. I hope those who were upset can understand that it came from ignorance, not malice. So for those that don't know, malice means like an intent to hurt. So she's saying here she mean for it to come across like that. You know, it was due to a lack of knowledge, not an intention to hurt. And because I myself am not like part of the Islamic, community, I don't necessarily feel like I have a right to speak on this apology. I would reserve this apology being accepted for people who are actually a part of Islam. So for those of you that may be and are watching this video, feel free to let me know your thoughts in this in the comment section below. But obviously, I don't necessarily feel like I have a right to talk about this. The structure of it, in my opinion, seems, it's made from a standpoint of wanting to make things right. However, it's not my place to accept it, so you guys let me know what you think about this in the comment section. This section reads my comments on Queen Elizabeth and other individuals who have been enacted violence and harm in their lifetime. I want to clarify right off the bat, I would never talk about any individuals or people who have done nothing but spread positivity, cheer, and kindness. This is in reference to sweet Lizzie Winkle, which, quick interjection for those that don't know, she was associated with Royal High and passed away. They did like a whole memorial for her in the game, and it's just a very tragic story. I apologize to family members or friends of the deceased party who came across that comment misinformed about the context and assumed I was speaking about their beloved family member or friend. And in this comment, she says, y'all are burning with Lizzie. And this is a section that I want to clarify. From my research and interviews, it is pretty evident that there's a specific group of users on Twitter who are actively trying to cancel the game. And unfortunately, stuff that they have chosen to do is take tweets out of context. And genuinely, when I read this, I could not believe it could be taken that way. And you guys can say this is biased or, I'm biased in the situation. However, I really don't think she was talking about Lizzie Winkle. And if you look at the people who are posting this and the people who originally started commenting about this, you will find a pattern that is always the same people. So I just want to put that out there that I think it's important to hold people accountable. For example, her comments about Islam and using the R word. However, I feel like this specific one is a reach in an attempt to just defame the game further. Underneath, she writes, my words were only directed towards Queen Elizabeth II, who passed away 3 days before my comment. It was about her legacy of imperialism and the harm caused under her reign, not an innocent person who shared her name. In the original thread, I had clarified that I meant Queen Lizzie, and even explained that to friends who asked. I would never speak about someone who was genuinely such a kind soul to this earth in no way, shape, or form. And then she clarified here, nah, I meant the Queen, never that sweetheart. So referring to Lizzie Winkle, she didn't mean Lizzie Winkle. And I don't want to get too much into this. However, I know there's lots of you guys that are from the UK for my channel analytics. And if you guys have ever done any research into the past of the royal family or the monarchy for the UK, there's certainly some not so great things have occurred. And that's the same thing for a lot of other countries. I don't want to say like the UK is solely a country that has done this. However, specifically, there has been some stuff in the royal family that is not great. And if you guys do some research, research the Princess Diana situation, Meghan Markle, there's a lot of examples of racism and, hiding things and people not being held accountable because of their royal status. And I certainly do think it's important to hold those people accountable. Personally, would I ever talk about someone who's deceased in a tweet? Probably not. It's just my belief that, when somebody passes, leave them alone, let the memory be there and just move on. However, I do understand how some people would be upset, obviously, with the actions of Queen Elizabeth, and I again would encourage you guys to do your own research regarding that because there's a lot to it. She writes here, I want to strongly emphasize that my comment was strictly in reference to Queen Elizabeth and nobody else. If anyone, especially Lizzie Winkle's family, friends, or fans saw my comment out of context and felt hurt, I'm deeply sorry for the misunderstanding. I deeply regret that my wording caused confusion. I completely understand how upsetting that must have been. The mention of an old post from when I was 12 about Royal High to add wings only made the mix-up worse, and for that, I truly apologize. So we're going to get to that comment. I saw a lot of people on Twitter being like, nobody refers to Queen Elizabeth as Queen Lizzie. Everybody I know refers to her as Queen Lizzie. Maybe that's just where I live, I don't know, but when we discussed it in school when she had passed, it was like a lot of people were like, oh, the Queen Lizzie, like she's gone, like, oh, poor Lizzie, like stuff like that. I don't feel like it's a rare thing for people to refer to her as Lizzie. I saw a lot of people saying that they've never heard that. I heard that all the time at my school. You guys can let me know if you guys have heard that. Maybe it's not a super common thing, but at least from where I am, where the monarchy actively conquered where I lived, I think we don't necessarily have the best relationship with the monarchy, I would say, and as a result of that, people use mocking kind of nicknames for her like Lizzie because they don't necessarily respect her. Do I agree with that? I don't know, but just putting that out there. She attached this comment, we're going to work on Halloween XXX, and that's from Night Barbie. And then she writes, Barbie, will I ever be able to get the wings from the 2017 event? I was there for it. It even got the achievement, but I was too poor at the time. It was super hard to get any form of money. Will items from past events only be there for people who was there or had an achievement? So I guess this was a comment that I guess the wings from the event were... I don't quite know the background behind this because I'm reading this for the first time with you guys. Perhaps the wings were part of the Lizzie Winkle event. I'm not quite sure. And I guess people were using this and taking this out of context and saying it was made in conjunction with the other post. I'm not quite sure. But even if you just look here, this profile picture, and this one is different. So I'm a little bit confused. But anyways, sorry, my voice is going away. Theft claims. Another post that I've seen shared was from when I was 12, talking about a mini game idea I wanted added to Royal High. Again, I was 12, a digital footprint y'all never forget. Where you could steal/carry in-game items to hit people over the head. It was just a silly childhood idea. I had no understanding... Excuse me, I was about to cough. I have no understanding of what game development even was, or what stealing assets meant. This seemed more like a nitpick to me, and I generally find it silly finding people drag it up from the depths of 2017 and 2018. While it's not serious, I understand why people wanted clarification. I never actually stole anything. It was just a bad choice of words from a kid with no experience. This is the only other image I could find referencing the original tweet. Random Royal High idea, part 3, that I totally wouldn't do. So I wish you had the option to steal in Royal High, like irrelevant stuff like the Fountain Girl or Lamp, just something dumb. I'd say something like bonk gang as I proceed to take a lamp. Again, this is, in my opinion, an example of people trying to take stuff out of context and people trying to villainize the game owner as part of a smear campaign. If you guys look on Twitter and see the accounts that are most commonly and actively posting about this, my impression from the research I've done is that they are actively trying to form a smear campaign towards the game. And if you look, a lot of these people do have relations to other games. Not to get too much into it, but there's just a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of behind the scenes information that isn't necessarily public, and it's not my place to discuss. However, there's a lot to this, and I think this, in my opinion, is just such a reach. Like, it takes away from the very first comments that were made, like with the Lizzie thing and the Islam. It takes away from that, as well as the R word, by just putting in these random nitpicks and things that are clearly taken out of context. I just think it's harmful, and it takes away from the actual issues and stuff that should be addressed, and turns this into almost like it just makes it seem less serious, which I think does a disservice to the other things that have been addressed in this document. The conclusion. To conclude, I want to sincerely apologize again to everyone affected by my old comments or language. I've grown so much since then. I take full accountability for the things I said. I don't use that language anymore, and I actively work to make sure others around me feel safe and respected. Accountability and acknowledgement matter. It's the only way we move forward. I believe in building a community where we can own our mistakes, learn from them, and grow together. I hope people can see that my actions now reflect the person I've become, not who I was years ago. An apology is empty if you have done nothing to actually change the actions of your words. Moving forward, I'll continue to spread the ideology I preach and hope others hold me to the same standard as I saw today. It's important to me that my past doesn't overshadow the inclusive, safe space I'm building today. Thank you for reading this far, and I want to conclude again with the sorry. So that is the whole document. I will link it down below for those of you that maybe want to read it on your own if I read too fast. And personally, I don't have the rights to accept certain aspects of this apology, so I'd encourage those of you that do to leave a comment down below. As for the R word, personally, as someone who is neurodivergent, again, I would never use that word as a weaponization against anybody else. However, I think it's important to note that the kind of communal rhetoric around that word was a lot different in 2020, and I feel like 2020 was the year or the kind of time frame where we started to hold people accountable for using that word and actually saying, no, like, this word is harmful. Again, in my childhood, there's a lot of people who would call me the R word or would say that's so R-worded or stuff like that. It was used kind of as like a slang. I'm not saying that it's right or that means it should be used. However, I think it does kind of provide some context that the word wasn't necessarily as, clear with how it cannot be used as it is today back then. That's not me defending the usage of it, that's just me giving some context from my perspective. As for the Islam comments, I can't talk on that. I don't really have the right to talk on that, so I'd encourage you guys to make comments about that. The Queen Lizzie comment, certainly I think I would never make comments about somebody after they passed. I think that's kind of distasteful. However, the importance here is that taking accountability for it, and I can understand why Peach maybe wouldn't have the best, perception of the king and the queen or the whole monarchy as a whole because of some of the stuff that has happened. And again, I'm not a political channel, but I would encourage you guys, if you are curious about it, to do some research into the background of it. I'm not fully victimizing or villainizing the entire country and saying that they're bad, nothing like that. However, as a place of origin, where I specifically reside, that has been a victim of the colonization and, taking of lands from other people by the monarchy, I feel like, at least where I am, we have kind of the narrative and ability to talk about the situation, and definitely the people I live with don't necessarily love the monarchy. That's all I'm gonna say. But I have my own personal beliefs regarding the monarchy and why personally I don't necessarily identify with them. However, I do think it's important to recognize that they are still the monarchy and the leaders for certain countries, and of course it's important to still be respectful regardless of what somebody has done in their life after their passing. And the final thing is this last chunk here. I just think this is so taken out of context. This just doesn't make any sense. And in my opinion, this is just like a smear campaign. It's people trying to grasp at straws to create this false impression that the game owner is some nefarious, terrible person. And personally, I just don't think that. That's my opinion. But of course, you guys can form your own opinions about this. And with that being said, I feel like this was a pretty, decent document regarding this stuff. I know a lot of you guys have been mentioning other tweets in my comments. However, if they aren't addressed in this document, I'm not going to really talk about them, mainly because there's so much misinformation going around. Comments that I saw and certain comments from other people, some of them are true, some of them are not true, some of them are taken out of context, such as this one here, where people are saying, oh my god, Peach steals, and then they sent me this as the evidence. I'm like, what? This doesn't make any sense. And again, I understand the importance of holding people accountable. However, I think you should hold people accountable for things they actually did and not take the stuff out of context to try and make them seem even worse, because then it takes away from the actual legitimate stuff that has been brought against that person. The other thing too is I've seen a lot of people, with this stuff coming out, specifically the Islam and the R word usage, people saying, oh, this game's terrible, I'm going to boycott it. And that is your right to boycott a game if you don't agree with that stuff and you don't think the game owner can change. Personally, I think everybody has the ability to change regardless of the game they own. But if you're going to behave like that, I would highly encourage you to hold to other games the same standard. This isn't me saying, oh, well, this game did it too, so it's okay. No. However, I think a lot of people fail to recognize that a lot of their favorite games, including Royal High, Dressed Impress, other large games on Roblox, they don't have a squeaky clean history either, right? And I would beg to say that there's a lot of games on Roblox that have yet to be held accountable for the stuff that they've done. I'm not trying to deflect here, but I'm just saying, if you're going to hold a game accountable, which I think should be the case, I think you should hold people accountable, I would expect that you would hold everybody accountable to the same standard. I think there is some biases against this game because of its early success, and I understand wanting to hold people accountable, and I do think the owner should be held accountable for these comments that were made, regardless of how long ago they were made. However, if you're going to go after the owner in this sort of witch hunt, and actively try to smear the game and create this whole movement against the game, where is that kind of energy when other games are doing the same thing? You know what I mean? Or in my opinion, worse things. If you look into the whole GG situation for Dressed Impress, I'm just saying, You know, and again, I'm not trying to deflect or say that, oh, well, somebody else did it, so it's okay. It's not okay. I don't think any of this is okay. However, when you're going to be holding people to a high standard, I think that that is absolutely necessary, but make sure that you're holding every other one of your favorite games also accountable. Because accountability only works if it's addressed evenly to everybody. You can't just pick and choose who you hold accountable and then demonize them, and then other games that need to be held accountable are never held accountable. And I do want to say, although like certain games like Just Impress have put out statements, we learned from the Lady Gaga situation that Gigi is still actively involved in the game, which is kind of alarming to me. But regardless, please, if you're going to hold games accountable, like I believe you should, please also hold other games accountable too. I think, at least from some of the comments that I've seen, I definitely do find that there are certain groups on Twitter that are actively targeting this game more because of their dev team and the color of their skin, which I definitely don't think is good. One of the tweets, which I'm not going to put on the screen, was somebody talking about the game and how the game owners are a certain background, and so that has led them to behave this way. And then in the same wavelength, we're basically saying that Royal High has never done anything wrong because the dev team has lighter skin. It's just really terrible and backwards thinking that should never be part of this kind of conversation. Somebody's skin color does not dictate the way they will behave, and certainly doesn't omit other groups from being held accountable. So again, if you guys are gonna hold people accountable, I would highly urge you to hold everybody to the same level in standards. Don't just pick and choose who you hold accountable for their actions. If we want to create an inclusive space where people, you know, make good decisions and aren't actually harming others, you need to hold everybody accountable, not just people that you already have a pre-existing vendetta against. So regardless, with all of that in mind, again, I apologize for my voice. My throat is so sore and it's like so hard to talk. However, I did want to take a second to put this video out on Saturday so that you guys could see it. Again, let me know your thoughts in this in the comment section below. I think what's important is that people take accountability for their actions, and I do appreciate the document. In my opinion, I think it was worded well, but of course, no matter what I say, people are going to say I'm biased. So let me know your thoughts and your comments in the comment section below about this. What do you think about it? Do you think it's a good apology? Personally, I think an apology is when somebody takes accountability. They confirm what they've done or haven't done. They say sorry and they tell us how they're going to change. And I saw all those aspects in this document. So let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section below. And I'll be back tomorrow, hopefully, if my throat isn't too sore. So I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.